Watch right now on the Front News Project. Putin was spotted in the Kursk region. Meanwhile, drones are striking all across Russia. Oil depots have been destroyed, factories are burning. The Russian army is preparing a new offensive. Kyiv, Sumy, and Poltava are under threat. Exclusive details. And also, the modernization of deadly Russian drones. Shaheds will become even more dangerous. Watch fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his gang unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom continues. Greetings, this is Front News. Vladimir Timoshenko is with you. For the next 30 minutes, you will hear the truth about the war, which our journalists gather from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then let's begin. And we start right away with exclusive material. Russia may launch another offensive in the near future. The enemy's goal is to reach Poltava through the Sumy region in order to further attack Kyiv. This is exactly what various public channels are reporting right now. In a minute, we'll tell you when this offensive might begin. In addition, yes, Russia failed to launch its nuclear Yars, but at the same time, the enemy's Shaheds have become even more dangerous. Now these drones are equipped with combined warheads of two types, Russian and Iranian made. Both weigh 90 kilograms, which is almost twice as much as the standard 50-kilogram version that was used previously. But that's not all. The Russian Federation is moving elite troops to the Kursk region instead of advancing in the east. This was reported by the Ukrainian General Staff. All the details are in our report.
Russia is once again blackmailing Ukraine with a large-scale offensive along the entire front line. There are opinions that Poltava and the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, could be under threat.
The resources of the Russian army are being depleted one way or another, regardless. And in any case, we are essentially saying that the offensive impulses Russia is showing today are quite clearly simply not enough to carry out full-fledged operational tactical level operations at this time. Obviously, the Russian strategic offensive operation, on the other hand, is still ongoing.
In addition to threats to use the RS-24 Yars missile with a possible nuclear warhead against Ukraine, Russian forces have begun employing a new tactic to exhaust Ukrainian troops. These are breakthroughs using motorcycles, buggies, and scooters. Considering that the Yars missile never actually launched from the test site, while the scooters at least managed to move, the latter idea is more advantageous for Russia.
This so-called summer campaign, or rather, yet another summer campaign by the enemy, is indeed entering its active phase, and it is clear that the priorities right now are attempts to fully occupy the Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
After analyzing the situation, the Institute for the Study of War concluded that Russia is not agreeing to a ceasefire before peace negotiations in order to advance on the battlefield and secure concessions from Ukraine and its partners.
We can see how complicated the situation has become right now for us in the Pokrovsk direction, because the enemy is managing to cut off logistics on the Kostiantynivka-Pokrovsk highway. In fact, it's clear that the battle for Kostiantynivka, which we've talked about, has really already begun.
No matter how Russia advances, the Ukrainian armed forces are confidently eliminating the occupiers from our land. 1,030 Russian invaders were eliminated in the past day alone. In total, since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has lost more than 975,000 soldiers killed and wounded in its war against Ukraine.
The enemy's attempts have been and continue to be assessed by our command in order to deploy our forces and resources in defense, so as not to allow a breakthrough or a collapse of the front. This is our main task for today, as well as, of course, the opportunity to exhaust the enemy's resources as much as possible.
The Ukrainian armed forces have achieved tactical successes even in the so-called liberated Kursk region, according to statements from the Russian side. Recently, Ukrainian soldiers advanced to the southern outskirts of the settlement of Tetkino in the Kursk region. However, the Russians also had certain successes there. Specifically, there were recorded advances by the occupiers toward the international border checkpoint southeast of Tetkino.
The main thing is that part of this border area remains under the control of the defense forces. The defense forces continue to carry out their assigned tasks. The Kursk operation is not over. In this regard, I would also add that I consider the Belgorod situation together with this.
The occupiers have reduced infantry assaults, but increased the number and scale of air and artillery strikes in the Kupiansk area. However, in the Borova area, Ukrainian forces have recently achieved successes. It has been confirmed that the defenders have advanced west of Sergeyevka.
But the Kupiansk direction is one of the priorities for the Russians in this offensive campaign, in this wave, this next offensive wave, the summer one. Accordingly, as I already mentioned, the enemy will continue trying to advance in the direction of Borova and Kupiansk.
According to reports from the General Staff, the aggressor is now forced to transfer reserves to the Kursk region from other directions, in particular airborne troops and naval infantry, which were supposed to reinforce offensive actions in the Toretsk, Pokrovsk, and Orekov directions. Despite the fact that the Russian army also continues combat operations in the directions of 4 key industrial cities in the Donetsk region. These are Kostiantynivka, Drushkivka, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk.
Also, on the night before last Sunday, the enemy attacked various regions of Ukraine using 273 Shahed drones and decoy drones. This attack affected the Kiev region, Dnipropetrovsk region, and of course Donbas. And in the city of Vasilkiv, not far from the capital, one of the Russian drones killed a young woman. Her young son, father-in-law, and mother-in-law are in the hospital. Their house was destroyed, as was the neighboring one. TSN correspondent Mariana Bukan visited the site of the tragic events.
Throughout the entire period of the war, this was the most terrifying. There have never been strikes of this scale before, probably never, and especially not in our city.
Apartment buildings without windows, a burning medical center, and private homes completely destroyed. This is the result of the most massive enemy attack on the city of Vasilkiv in the Kyiv region. On this street, 2 private houses were completely destroyed. It was a direct hit. It struck this house. A 27-year-old woman lived here. She died, and 3 more people from here are in the hospital. Her name was Anna. She was a photographer. In the middle of the house, only the corridor, kitchen, and bathroom survived. An unfinished cup of coffee, broth on the stove, and pancakes that were being defrosted for breakfast. It's clear that the family was preparing for a completely different Sunday morning. Lyubov, a distant relative of the deceased, says, "There were 5 people in the house at the moment of the strike. Anna with her husband and their 4-year-old son Mark, and the husband's parents. They are currently in the local hospital. And little Mark, the father who survived, took to Akhmatit. The boy has shrapnel wounds on his face.
He won't be able to see because a piece of shrapnel hit him."
The strike also severely damaged the neighboring house. Here, an entire wall was blown out and the roof is gone. Fortunately, no one was hurt here.
There's nowhere to live.
Nadezhda Pivin is the closest neighbor of the affected family, and also their godmother. She also no longer has a home.
I sit here and look around and my heart feels empty.
Her family was saved because they managed to reach the shelter in time.
The explosions were extremely powerful. We were thrown around a lot, but with that last one I realized something was wrong here. Because the sound was so sharp, almost cutting. I always hide, and I tell everyone, please people, take cover.
Almost all the neighbors who live nearby came to help clear out what was left standing for those affected.
Standing.
Honestly, my heart is just breaking. All the neighbors came to help too.
And Nadezhda sits by her ruins and doesn't want to leave them.
All day I've been here empty. This is my home, I put down roots here. This is my walnut tree, this is my apricot tree, these were my onions, my garlic. I want to live here. I grew up here, I was born here, I'm used to this place.
Right behind Nadezhda's destroyed house is a church that's almost 300 years old. And it withstood even though it was left without windows.
All of this used to be covered with glass, with icons, everything.
Father Ivan says, the main thing is to clean everything up and put things in order as much as possible by Thursday. That's the day of the service.
We're all trying to get everything done today, so that at least there will be something for St. Nicholas's Day.
The grandmother and grandfather of little Mark, who is currently left without his mother, are in different hospital wards. The doctors are not letting Valentina in, saying that she is in too bad a condition, both physically and emotionally.
Extensive multiple shrapnel and gunshot wounds to the soft tissue structures of the face, involving both facial bones as well as the overlying scalp region, including the overlying skin. A CT scan revealed that the woman has a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the left frontal area of her brain.
Nikolai has an open leg fracture. He says when the attack began, the family was already prepared to leave the city, but they didn't make it in time.
I will never forgive them for this, those neighbors.
Those neighbors.
And now an analysis of the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Pokrovsk front, the enemy carried out 43 offensive actions during the day. The activity of Russian occupiers was recorded in the areas of the settlements of Yablonovka, Zarya, Shevchenko-Pervoye, Novaya Poltavka, Mirolyubovka, Elizavetovka, Lisovka, Dakskaya, Kotlino, Novosergeyevka, Udashnoye, Troitskoye, Kotlyarovka, Andreevka, and in the directions of Popov Yar and Novonikolaevka. Meanwhile, as you have already heard earlier, the Kremlin is boasting about new deadly features of its Shahed drones. Allegedly, Russian engineers have equipped the drones with protection against electronic warfare and increased their warhead. Is this even true? Or is it just another myth of Russian propaganda? How in turn can Ukraine respond? Believe me, there is something to respond with. Our journalists know all the details.
Faster, more powerful, and more resistant to electronic warfare. The Russians have claimed that they have improved the capabilities of their Shahed drones, and now it will be harder for Ukrainian air defense to deal with them. Among other things, we see that Russian engineers continue to enhance the characteristics of their long-range drones. And recently they have achieved certain successes. This includes a new engine, a new warhead, and a new navigation system.
During this time, the Shaheds have undergone, well, if we count very accurately, about 8 or 10 modifications or upgrades. This is related to improvements in the transmission system, improvements in the communication system, and the addition of inertial, well, not inertial, or rather, yes, inertial systems, because initially they flew purely on GPS, then inertial systems were added, and now it seems there are even Shaheds that can fly using visual, that is, by map guidance.
The Russians also claim that they have supposedly upgraded the microelectronics, although it's more likely a matter of some new Chinese microchips. These are supposedly going to help bypass the electronic warfare systems used by the Ukrainian armed forces. And the updated anti-spoofing algorithm has even been called the best in the world by Russia.
There is information that with the help of Starlink, they have 2 communication channels, one for transmitting information and another for control. And in fact, a Shahed-type drone has now essentially become like an FPV drone, which is operated by an operator. So they are developing very actively in this direction.
At the same time, the Ukrainian side often cannot even assess the new characteristics of the Shahed because they try to destroy these deadly drones before they even take off.
At one point, we destroyed several locations where Shaheds were stored, and this happened on the mainland part of the so-called Russian Federation, using the forces and means of the naval forces. There was even a case when this happened together with the instructors who were supposed to train the Russian personnel there.
But let's get back to the updates. It is also reported that the drone's warhead itself has been modified. Its weight has reportedly increased from 50 to 90 kilograms, which is why the updated Shahed, however, has lost half of its range and can now fly a maximum of 650 kilometers.
There's nothing new here. They just adapted the warhead for the Shahed. So this isn't something new, right? The fact that they're starting to, by the way, the first use was about half a year ago. Our Institute of Forensic Examination identified and found this, isolated this warhead.
At the same time, the Russians are also changing the type of warhead. The original Iranian version for the destruction of fortified areas has long been written off by the Russian Federation. After all, drones are used against civilians, and to cause maximum destruction to residential buildings, something else is needed.
The function of the munition itself has also changed. That is, the standard high-explosive fragmentation munition has started to be replaced, including with incendiary explosive or purely high-explosive types. And the second important component, we are already seeing isolated cases of such drones being used to drop unknown explosive devices.
As for the engine modification, it is now allegedly said to have improved the drone's flight performance. It is claimed that the UAV is capable of reaching an altitude of 3 kilometers and flying at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. The new Shahed can also dive sharply at its target from this altitude at speeds of up to 400 kilometers per hour, which is expected to significantly complicate the work of our mobile fire teams and electronic warfare systems. At the same time, the use of long-range drones has also changed. Apparently, despite the bold statements, the production of the Shahed is still far from the targets announced by the Kremlin. That is why strike drones are now being launched mixed together with decoys.
Well, in different situations it's different, but more often than not, these are Gerberas who pose as if they were Shahids. In reality, they are, well, like Shahids, they are not. We should have long ago forgotten the wording Shahid. We should use at best like Shahid, because there is nothing left of the Iranian Shahid.
The Ukrainian side has not yet officially responded to information about the new Shahids, but they have responded with action. Despite the fact that each drone is now supposedly able to reach its target without any issues, the defense forces repelled an unprecedented drone attack the day before. Out of the 273 UAVs launched, 88 were shot down and another 128 were suppressed by electronic warfare systems. In other words, the effectiveness of our air defense was over 95%.
And now let's move to the Huliaipol sector of the front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. 3 times the occupiers tried to advance toward the positions of Ukrainian units near Krasne in the Huliaipol sector. Huliaipol and Vaisok were hit by airstrikes with unguided aerial rockets. A bus and a residential district that was attacked also came under fire. Another day of Russian terror in Ukrainian Kherson. The day before, 10 people in the city were injured because of the occupiers. The enemy dropped explosives from a drone onto a passenger bus. In addition, they shelled the city's Korabelny district with artillery. TSN correspondent Svitlana Pavuk will tell you more about this horror.
At 7 in the morning, the Russians attack a city bus with a drone. The bus driver tells how it all happened.
The blast wave came from here, it blew out the doors and the floor. That was the main impact. Basically, what saved people was that there weren't many of them. Most of them were in the passenger compartment, and the blast wave came from the back.
However, 5 passengers sustained injuries of varying severity.
I have a concussion.
And an hour and a half later, the Russians began shelling residential buildings in the Korabelny district with artillery. People say there were at least 7 explosions.
3 here, 3 there, 1 over there, and further on.
5 residents of these buildings were injured. They were in their apartments during the artillery strike.
What kind of injury do you have?
Well, my leg.
Where were you?
I was in the hallway and my mother was in the kitchen. She was lucky.
Most of the injured are elderly people, left with high blood pressure and in a state of shock after what happened.
It swept by and I hit over there. The door got jammed after the first shot and I started rattling, turning the key.
After years of shelling, they all already knew that the most dangerous place in the apartment was near the windows, so everyone hid as far away from them as possible.
I wasn't near the windows. I was farther away. I was further back there.
This man has shrapnel wounds on his arm. He says he survived because he barricaded the windows in advance.
It's good that the windows were also covered with pillows. All the pillows are torn up like a sieve, the pillows. The pillows saved us. If it weren't for the pillows, we wouldn't have made it out of there.
He shows his shattered apartment on the first floor.
It even knocked out our wall with a loud crash.
He says he wanted to go down to the basement with his wife, but they didn't make it in time. They hid in the hallway.
There are the pillows. You see, the pillows took it all on themselves.
This woman was at work at the time of the strike, but she also needed medical help after she saw her bombed-out apartment on the 3rd floor.
I had a heart attack. I barely made it here. The balcony is hanging. Everything there is destroyed too.
Not far from the houses that were damaged by the artillery shelling, an enemy drone was also found. It landed on the grounds of a kindergarten. Explosives experts have already removed the device in order to neutralize it after inspection, and Kherson experiences such combined attacks almost every day.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Toretsk sector of the front. Let's be honest, this is yet another sacred target for Putin and his gang, so the situation here is extremely tense. Today, in the Toretsk direction, the occupiers launched 12 assaults on our defenders' positions near Ivka, Druzhba, and Toretsk. The defense forces are steadfastly holding back the onslaught and have repelled 9 enemy attacks. 3 more clashes are still ongoing. The news of the day in Russia. Dictator Putin allegedly visited the Kursk region, where he met with volunteers and even stopped by the nuclear power plant too. Kremlin propagandists even published a video featuring their leader. But whether it was really Putin or his double is unknown. One thing is certain, in reality it was a hellish night for Russia. Drones struck a strategic Russian factory in the Oriol region. And in Russia, they couldn't restore the internet after the drone attacks. The signal was jammed to bring down the UAVs. Problems were reported in the Moscow region, Tula, Saransk, as well as in the Vladimir and Lipetsk regions. Meanwhile, the enemy is preparing a new assault on the Kharkiv region. There is a buildup of soldiers and military equipment near the border with Ukraine. Details in the report. It was another loud night in Russia. Drones attacked the Oriol region.
Quiet, 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 it's flying. There's going to be an explosion now. Grandpa? It's flying. There it is. Look, Grandpa, over there. The main thing is not towards us, please.
The Volkov plant for the production of semiconductor devices came under attack.
There's going to be an explosion now, Grandpa.
Look, I think that's the plant.
That's already, like, the 8th one.
Meanwhile, there is fierce fighting on the front. According to the General Staff, since the beginning of the day on May 20th, there have been 129 combat clashes. The occupiers are attacking most heavily in the Pokrovsk direction. The Ukrainian armed forces are holding back the assaults. The Russians also tried to break through the border in the Kharkiv region.
Today, the largest number of combat engagements is taking place in the Pokrovsk direction. As we can clearly observe, here in this particular situation, the enemy is trying to use their favorite tactic as part of their usual strategy, forming pincers in order to encircle this settlement and then advance further in the operational direction. We are saying that a rather difficult situation may develop near Milenhrad and Konstantinivka, because we are also talking about Toretsk and Chasiv Yar. It is obvious that the enemy's priorities are determined by their attempts to achieve the strategic goal that has been set for the Russians since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, namely the complete occupation of Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
Moreover, the Russian occupiers continue to use banned chemical weapons against the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukrainian intelligence has published a relevant intercepted enemy conversation.
A lighter is useless if it doesn't ignite. If the chemicals are good, we can try using chemicals. There's no TT or wolf or maybe 2 wolves. To be continued.
Back to the trench again?
Yes, for now we don't have any other task.
The Russian army has never followed the rules of warfare or the use of certain types of weapons, including weapons of mass destruction. Accordingly, this is far from the first case of chemical weapons being used. So unfortunately, there's nothing surprising about this. Yes, such cases have been recorded, are being recorded, and will probably continue to be recorded in the future, because the Russians use absolutely everything to achieve their goals. Everything that is prohibited.
And the news of the day for Russia. Dictator Putin allegedly visited the Kursk region, where he met with volunteers and visited the Kursk nuclear power plant too. Kremlin propagandists even published a video with their leader, but it's impossible to identify him.
It's purely a propaganda move. We understand perfectly well that once again, Putin wants to show that the situation is under control, and to demonstrate that the Kursk region has supposedly been cleared of defense forces, which does not correspond to reality today. This raises a logical question. Who then is the Russian Air Force or artillery striking in the territory of the Kursk region? Are they really hitting their own people, or were they aiming at Putin? Therefore, to avoid situations like this, I think it's quite likely that certain Mosfilm studios were used as they matched the scene shown in the propaganda video.
And while Putin is supposedly strolling around Kursk, Ukraine and the Czech Republic have agreed to cooperate in training Ukrainian F-16 pilots. the United States has also not stopped supplying weapons to Ukraine. All aid previously approved by Congress continues to flow, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said. At the same time, Trump refused to support sanctions against Russia because he wants to make business deals with Putin, writes the New York Times.
I hope that our diplomats are still able to maintain that level of diplomatic skill and that our country's military and political leadership, by maneuvering between the moods of the leader, or rather, the head of the White House, are accordingly doing significant work with senators and congressmen. I sincerely hope that here, let's say, there are indeed some clear and definite indications that things are actually not quite as bad as they might seem today, and that this current situation really can in fact be corrected.
No matter how events unfold, the Ukrainian armed forces are not standing still. Within the 425th Separate Assault Regiment Skala, the 1st Assault Motorcycle Brigade in the armed forces of Ukraine has appeared, whose key task is to seize positions through rapid breakthroughs.
And now let's move to the Kharkiv and Kupiansk sectors of the front. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill and maim. In the Kharkiv direction, Ukrainian units repelled 6 enemy attacks in the areas of Vovchansk, Kamenka and towards Mala Shapkovka. In the Kupiansk direction, our soldiers repelled 3 enemy attacks in the areas of Kondrashivka, Zarizove and Nova Krulakivka. Another battle is still ongoing. Athena and her fighters. A 25-year-old woman commands a heavy artillery crew in the Zaporizhzhia region, and under her command are men over 40. However, despite their age, this crew skillfully destroys the enemy and works in the fields of the Zaporizhzhia direction every single day. The film crew of TSN correspondent Ruslan Yarmolyuk witnessed how these defenders stopped enemy infantry with 152mm caliber shells. Let's watch.
Oh, I can sense it. I hear it. Don't go out. I hear it. It's coming. No, it's coming.
Enemy drones monitor the sky over Zaporizhzhia around the clock, searching for our gunners and equipment. Because of the huge number of enemy drones, the artillerymen have to camouflage themselves a lot. After every shot, the gun is hidden because enemy drones are constantly flying overhead, and from time to time explosions go off in the tree line. An old Soviet cannon and a very young crew commander. This is Maria with the call sign Athena.
Well, she's from 1976, I'm from 2000. There's quite an age gap between us. So the cannon was born long before I was.
She's 25, while the men she commands are over 40. However, the age difference doesn't get in the way, and the crew works together in harmony. Maria is listened to.
I asked the guys, let's do it better. She changes us, and maybe she should do less because she is a girl. Maria is originally from Slovyansk. As a child, she saw firsthand what the Russian world and occupation meant.
It's chaos. It's chaos inside because no one prepared us for this, especially not the children. Not to mention that our parents weren't prepared either. Parents, grandmothers, grandfathers, we were all unprepared. The younger generation had to face this. There was such an important line here, you know? After all, there were 2 camps, and it was important not to break. There really were 2 camps, and everyone had to hold on.
She didn't break, went through training, learned to operate drones, but in the end ended up in artillery.
You know, when people ask, why did you decide to do it? What was the reason? What reason could there be? It's your country, your mother, and she's in trouble. What is a child supposed to do? They have to protect her.
A 5-ton cannon is aimed by coordinates and ready for action. Somewhere along the front, enemy infantry is advancing again, and it needs to be stopped with something heavy, like a 152mm caliber.
Sometimes we don't even have time to camouflage ourselves before a shell lands 200 or 300 meters away. Well, we get warnings about drones and we fire when the sky is clear.
Yosik is aiming at the target, a former construction worker from the Kiev region, now an artillery gunner. He had no military experience and had never been a gunner before the war.
Here I'm self-taught, as they say.
Athena gives the order to prepare for battle, and the all-male crew springs into action. One carries the shell, another loads it into the barrel, and a third pulls the cord.
Honestly, I want to live to see victory. I want to see the results of the time I've invested, of the life I've lived.
Bores, that's what they call the large caliber shells flying across the fields. The old cannon, in the hands of men under female command, is obedient and accurate.
At first it was even tough.
In the beginning, it was very difficult because of the age difference and the fact that she's a woman. But now we've been on this assignment for the 2nd month. Now everything has really settled down, everything is running smoothly. I don't see any problems with it at all.
They stretch nets over the cannon, quickly camouflage it, and prepare new shells just in case. The crew hides, because the enemy starts firing back, churning up the groves, and searching for the female artillery officer Athena and her warriors. They may not be young anymore, but they are skilled. That's all for today. But very soon, Front News will bring you new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.
Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief. Today we're going to be talking about, honestly, a lot. One of the major themes is the peaceful resolution that's on the table once again, the exchange of POWs, and also what all of that means. And of course, we're going to discuss it together in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. As per usual, please leave your questions, suggestions, thoughts, and constructive criticism down below, because I read all of it, I highly appreciate it, and I do like this communication. Let's go. So recently, Trump said that he really doesn't like what Putin is doing. He's striking Ukrainian cities, and he's not going to be allowed to proceed with that. You know, bad things are going to happen. Russia is playing with fire. And then, once again, instead of actually sending a direct message, he says something along the lines of, "We are talking to Putin. We will see where that goes." I mean, man, you have been talking to Putin for 3.5 months now. Where did that go? Ukraine keeps getting bombed out of the wazoo every weekend, every day. I mean, Kyiv every other weekend, the rest of Ukraine every day. It's only getting worse. There is really nothing that you can say or do in communication with Putin, who, as you said in your own words, is just crazy a couple of days ago, that will change any of this. In fact, Medvedev, his personal little right-hand henchman and the resident Twitter drunk, did say that, you know, Trump, with these words and criticizing Putin, is playing with World War III. So Russia is really not interested in talking. Russia's not interested in your opinion. Russia is interested in threatening you. And I would think that for someone like Trump, that would be really devastating to their ego, and they would actually get tired of being mocked by Russia and they would do something. But turns out they're okay with being mocked by Russia. Anyways, on that note, there is yet another peaceful resolution being prepared by Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine obviously unequivocally said that we are ready for a peaceful resolution. Zelensky did come out and say the other day that he does not want, and Ukraine does not want, the war to continue into the summer of 2026. We don't want the war to last that long. Obviously, we don't want our citizens to wake up in debris of their apartments till, you know, for that long or ever really, but we are where we're at. We are where we are. And Ukraine has outlined a complete proposal for a peaceful settlement, right? For a ceasefire, for a peaceful settlement of the war. And that proposal has been given to Russia. Russia is obviously always stalling. They did say that they want to talk in Istanbul again on June 2nd. Ukraine's defense minister, Rustem Umerov, came back and said, well, I mean, why not now? Why June 2nd? You're just stalling. So they did say that they want to deliver to Ukraine something called a proposed memorandum, because Ukraine hasn't heard the word memorandum from Russia many times before, like the Budapest Memorandum. I mean, we've also heard about the word accords, like Minsk Accords 1 and 2, all of which have been violated by Russia. But I digress. Anyways, a memorandum in which Russia is asking for protections for Russian speakers. Russian speakers have never not been protected. In fact, Russian speakers and Russian has dominated Ukraine until 2022, when we finally started fighting again for our own language. So that's one of the first things on the list. The second thing on the list is, of course, that Ukraine needs to surrender the territories to Russia that Russia temporarily occupies. The next one is absolutely no EU or NATO membership, and so on and so forth. So really the only thing so far that I have seen on the news that has been dropped from Russia's ridiculous demands is the denazification of Ukraine. However, all of the other ridiculous demands still stand. Europe and Ukraine firmly responded that no, there is not going to be any deviation from Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and also there is not going to be any deviation from NATO membership or EU membership. And, well, Russia can suck it, pretty much. So here's the thing. I mean, every week we have an episode, and every week we talk about these peace resolutions, right? And every week they basically say the same thing. And then Trump comes out, he's angry at Putin, he says he doesn't like something, he says that he's the master negotiator, he says that they're going to figure it out, then he says that they're going to talk to Putin, then he blames Zelensky, then he has a temper tantrum on Truth Social and says that Putin is going wild and how can he strike Ukraine while we're talking. Basically, it feels like Groundhog's Day for the past 3.5 months now. And I honestly don't know what the solution in this is, because these negotiations have been fully chaperoned and encouraged by the United States. But it seems like with the addition of the Trump administration in the United States to the negotiation process and anything to do with Russia, it really has only gotten worse, but not even worse. Like, it's gotten worse in Ukraine in terms of airstrikes, it's gotten worse in terms of Russia's advances, but it has pretty much remained the same for 3.5 months. It basically goes something like this. Russia says that they have ridiculous demands. Every 2 weeks, they change the name of the documents in which they put these demands forth. Ukraine, Europe, and all of the logical and reasonable nations obviously say no to these demands. Russia is like, okay, well, let's continue negotiating. But in reality, it's not negotiations, right? Because they're just stalling, they're not changing anything. They say, okay, we're gonna look at your proposal and come back to you, and then they come back with the exact same thing. How do you call it negotiations? To me, it genuinely seems like we're stuck in a really, really bad version of a Groundhog Day that we just can't get out of. So I personally do not see the point in these diplomatic negotiations at the moment. What I do see the point in is giving Ukraine long-range weapons like Taurus, lifting all the restrictions from Ukraine's strikes onto the Russian territory with Western weapons that Ukraine has gotten now and before, and supplying Ukraine with enough military equipment that Ukraine can actually equip most of its brigades, and we get a surge in volunteers again, people who want to fight but don't go to fight because they're scared that they're not going to be provided with everything they need. This war is only going to be won on the battlefield. Russia is not going to be changing any of their demands. Even in the words of Donald Trump, is Putin doesn't want to budge because he thinks he's winning. His 3-day war has been lasting for 3 years now. But we are also consciously allowing Russia to have cards on the table. We're allowing them the room to think that they can actually continuously keep pushing forward these ridiculous demands. And one of those things is international prisoners. So as you might know, there was a massive prisoner exchange, 1,000 for 1,000. Done over the past week in 3 days. And there were 1,000 Russian prisoners of war exchanged for 1,000 Ukrainian prisoners of war. And now I do want to point out that there has not been a single Azov serviceman in that exchange, and that there are over 1,000 Azov servicemen still in captivity, and they're not being released, and they're not even being talked about. So no one knows what's happening with them, no one knows where they are, no one knows what's going on. So they are not being released. In 1,000 for 1,000 exchange, not a single Azov serviceman. Because, of course, Nazis, which they're not, and it has been internationally proven to be Russian propaganda, but that's besides the point. Another type of prisoners of war that Russia is not exchanging is foreign nationals that fought on the behalf of Ukraine. They're not exchanging, and not just foreign nationals, they're also particularly barely exchanging any soldiers who are now prisoners of war who are of Muslim beliefs, which is interesting. And I'll tell you why it's interesting, because Russia wants to use these prisoners as their pawns in their negotiations with Saudi Arabia, for instance, or with any other Arabic countries. And that's a really crappy tactic. Same goes for all of the other prisoners of war that are not Ukrainian, that are foreign nationals, because Russia doesn't want to exchange them. Russia wants to hold them hostage as a negotiation tool, an actual negotiation tool, where they're interested in resolving the situation. And they exchange these prisoners of war for their Russian assets abroad, high-ranking spies, arms dealers. They exchange them for actually very big fish. So Russia is using these people for their own benefit and for their own political gains with other countries. And these allied nations and these countries really allow Russia to do that, which is, in my opinion, just quite obscene. So in this entire process of peace negotiations, we have given Russia, we as the Western world, have given Russia absolutely no reason to even want to stop playing us and stop being so rude and crude and in our face with their ridiculous demands and never changing them. Because we're not necessarily doing anything about it. We're allowing Russia to use the prisoners of war for their political gain. We're exchanging soldiers for massive Russian assets, criminals, like internationally sought after criminals that are big fish to fry. Again, arms dealers, Russian spies, big figures in the Russian war and in the Russian influence worldwide. We're also not tightening the sanctions on Russia. Oh, which, by the way, Russia's other demand is the loosening of sanctions on Russia in the memorandum, right? Forgot about that one. So yeah, we're not tightening the sanctions on Russia. Trump keeps having his little meltdowns on Truth Social and saying that Putin is crazy and then saying he's talking to Putin, and he continues threatening to do something about it, but then never does anything about it. And that's kind of where we end up. So I guess my summary of this episode is I think the world really, really needs to look the truth in the face and really needs to stop relying on the United States to negotiate anything. The world also needs to stop pretending like these are real negotiations, not just a facade, not just a distraction, and not just a Russia stalling tactic, and actually start acting. Give Ukraine tourists, strengthen the sanctions on Russia, take off all the limitations of Ukraine's ability to strike deep into the territory of Russia with the weapons that have been given to Ukraine, help Ukraine advance our own military sector, because in fact we have been manufacturing our own weapons to substitute for those that we're not being given or can't buy, sell Ukraine Patriot systems and missiles for them, and really do facilitate the environment for us to be able to succeed. Because what's happening right now is really a circus and a charade, and it's getting really, really difficult and tiresome to continue watching it. Because, as I said, we're in a Groundhog's Day. How many times have you seen me on this screen saying, hi, today we're going to be talking about the peace negotiations or the next round of the peace negotiations? Where do they go? Nowhere. Does anything change on Russia's side? No. And that's where we are. And that's all I have for you for today. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to hear more episodes like this one, and I hope in the future they're actually going to be about a different subject, then please do not forget to subscribe to this channel, turn on all of your notifications. Also, of course, like this video, send it to a friend, and leave your questions, suggestions, thoughts, and constructive criticism. And also, leave me subjects that you would want to know more about, and I will be happy to make an episode on your suggestions. See you next time.
Drones swarm, missiles stall, and tough talks unfold. Ukraine's cutting-edge drones have already destroyed over a dozen Russian targets, and Western patience wears thin as the war's future hangs in the balance. We've got a lot to unpack, so stay with us. This is The Gaze. Don't forget to follow us on our website, YouTube, and socials for more sharp takes and frontline reporting. Russia faced a noisy night on May 28th, as its Ministry of Defense reported intercepting 296 Ukrainian drones across 13 regions. Yet, despite these air defense efforts, some drones got through, striking key industrial facilities tied to Russia's military industry. One significant hit was in Zelenograd, where a drone struck the Elma Technopark building, a major hub for Russia's electronics and microelectronics. In Dubna, locals reported 2 strikes on the AP Fedorov machine building plant, a critical site in Moscow Oblast producing combat UAVs, including the Orion drone system, touted as Russia's answer to Turkey's Bayraktar. The attacks also forced temporary closures at 4 major Moscow airports: Vnukovo, Domodedovo, Zhukovsky, and Sheremetyevo. In his evening address, President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed a firm response to Moscow's May drone strikes. So here we see the results.
Of course, we cannot publicly disclose our existing plans and our capabilities,
But the prospect is clear, to respond symmetrically to all Russian threats and challenges. They in Russia must clearly feel the consequences of what they are doing against Ukraine. And they will. Attack drones, interceptors, cruise missiles, Ukrainian ballistic systems. These are the key elements. We must manufacture all of them.
Ukraine is gearing up for mass production of the Sky Sentinel, an AI-powered autonomous anti-aircraft turret designed to counter drones like the Shahed 136 and slow cruise missiles.
Human involvement, like a soldier manually aiming the turret, isn't needed. Just set up the Sky Sentinel in a combat position, give it radar data, and it will do the rest: detect targets, lock on, track flight paths, calculate the shot, and fire, all on its own, the developers say to the Militarnie.
The Sky Sentinel operates without human aiming. Set it up, feed radar data, and it autonomously detects, locks on, tracks, calculates, and fires. It's armed with an M2 Browning machine gun, equipped with sensors for around-the-clock monitoring, and has an effective range up to 1,500 meters. Tested in combat, one prototype shot down 4 enemy drones at the front line. While optical components are imported, the software is entirely Ukrainian-made. Each turret costs about $150,000, far cheaper than missile systems. Defending a city might require 10 to 30 turrets, significantly boosting defenses against drone attacks. Ukraine has deployed the Gogol-M drone carrier in combat for the first time, a reusable mother drone using AI to control attack FPV drones. The Gogol-M carries 2 combat FPV drones up to 300 kilometers into enemy territory. Once released, the drones autonomously attack targets. And the major advantage? The cost. One mission costs about $10,000, replacing missile strikes that run $3 to $5 million. The mother drone returns safely, ready for reuse. It's especially effective against parked aircraft, air defenses, and critical infrastructure. Future plans include mother boats and tanks. The key is getting drones close to targets, which already works well. German company Quantum Systems has started full-scale production of fuselages for vector drones in Ukraine. Ukrainian facilities already assemble these drones and operate an research and development center and service station. Quantum Systems plans to double production capacity, boosting Ukraine's defense capabilities and export potential in military tech. Ukraine has repeatedly requested Germany supply Taurus missiles for strikes deep behind enemy lines. Yet, Berlin hesitates, fearing escalation and possible Russian nuclear retaliation. The issue of sending Taurus missiles has sparked heated political debate in Germany and criticism from Ukraine's allies, according to Politico.
There is no sign of Germany finally delivering Taurus cruise missiles, because I still see no unity in the coalition and no political will to respond appropriately and with strength and consistency to Russia's massive escalation. Such statements are therefore not helpful overall because they highlight Europe's weakness to Russia. Roderick Kiesewetter, politician of the Christian Democratic Union, on X social network.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz recently vowed full support for Ukraine, including no limits on weapon range supplied to Ukrainian forces. Not sure if this is a tragedy or farce, but it's unfolding right before our eyes. US President Donald Trump recently warned Russian dictator Vladimir Putin that his reluctance to engage in serious peace talks to end the war in Ukraine means he's playing with fire. Could this mean Trump is losing patience with Putin? Or maybe not. Trump made it clear that patience with Putin is running out. The president sounds frustrated by the lack of progress as Putin ignores the so-called Golden Bridge Trump offered to restore relations after peace is achieved. Putin is getting close to burning the bridge that Trump built for him, said an administration official. Trump called Putin crazy and reminded that very bad things would happen to Russia if it weren't for him. And then, predictably, something very, very Russian happened.
Regarding Trump's words about Putin playing with fire and really bad things happening to Russia, I know only one really bad thing: World War III. I hope Trump understands that. Dmitry Medvedev, Putin's seat warmer.
Right. The European Commission previously advised Comrade Medvedev to seek psychiatric help due to his aggressive rhetoric. And well, maybe he did, or maybe he did not. And really, what more does the world need to understand? This is the Russian way to peace. This is how Russia reacts when offered peaceful solutions, especially in a war it started. Russia craves war because Russia is the war. Russian oligarchs have built a fortune on this conflict, so why stop? All you need to do to prolong the war is kill a couple dozen more Ukrainian children and civilians in just 1 week. Sure, Trump might get a bit not too happy about it, but who cares about Trump in the Kremlin? The war goes on, and they say death is Russian business and business is good. Trump has yet to decide on imposing additional sanctions on Moscow, despite Putin's escalated attacks on Ukraine. Former US Special Envoy for Ukraine, Kurt Volker, expressed skepticism, saying that he had many chances and he avoided it every time.
Is a statement of the man who has led the effort for peace in so many different regions, making it clear and being completely transparent about his opinion about what's transpired. And I think that is something Russia should take seriously. Americans certainly do. And there are, as I've mentioned last week, that there are many different things that the president has at his disposal to make sure that our position is felt and that can be used to make an impact to stop this carnage.
So, by calling Putin crazy, Trump wasn't frustrated. It was a statement of demand. Meanwhile, European allies grow increasingly concerned Trump may abandon negotiations without applying real pressure on the Kremlin. Then the White House could call it a statement of no demand. Republicans in the Senate are preparing a bipartisan sanctions bill, but without Trump's approval, its fate in the House is uncertain. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stressed that Trump is keeping all options open and seeks a negotiated end to the war. Experts close to the administration expect a sanction decision within 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Maybe the new U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Her Excellency Julia Davis, should suggest the American administration move from Washington, D.C. to Kyiv for these 6 weeks. That way, while working on sanctions decisions, they could see what's really at stake outside their windows. As the war drags on, with its full-scale phase raging for over 3 years, Zelensky recently traveled to Germany to discuss new military supplies, including long-range missiles, even as much of Germany's support remains under wraps. It's a timely moment to recall what allowed Putin to launch this war in the first place: the West's hesitation and indecision. In a May 25th interview with Politico, retired US General Philip Breedlove, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe, laid it out bluntly. The West's failure to act decisively after Russia's 2014 occupation of Crimea set the stage for the current full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
We proposed deploying forces and conducting air patrols, but it was all dismissed as too escalatory. In the end, we did nothing, and Russia escalated anyway. The West hasn't inflicted enough pain on Putin to make him stop. Ukraine can win, but only if it gets everything it needs. Philip Breedlove, retired U.S. general, in an interview with Politico.
Breedlove pointed to 2014 as the critical moment when Western resolve could have curbed Putin's ambitions, and instead hesitation only emboldened the Kremlin, paving the way for the full-scale war that erupted in 2022. A BBC report on February of 2022 confirmed this pattern. Despite sanctions targeting Russia's banks, oligarchs, and energy sectors, Western measures failed to stop Russian aggression. Former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz calls for Putin to halt the invasion went unheeded. How surprising. More recently, on the 11th of May 2025, Putin rejected a 30-day ceasefire proposal backed by Ukraine and Western powers, instead demanding conditions like Ukraine's abandonment of NATO ambitions. Zelensky responded to this, making clear that peace talks would only start after a full ceasefire. And in short, the West's muted and hesitant response since 2014 enabled Russia's escalation. While Western capitals continue to debate, Ukraine remains on the front lines, waiting for the decisive support it was promised. Germany appears to be moving closer to supplying Ukraine with Taurus long-range cruise missiles, a weapon that could seriously threaten Russia's prized Crimean bridge. On the 26th of May, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that there are no longer any restrictions on the range of weapons delivered to Ukraine, not from the UK, France, or us, not even from the US. While he clarified the next day that he was referring to previous permissions, his inclusion of us fueled speculations that Taurus missiles deliveries might be imminent.
We want to make this production possible, and we also want it to be a joint production. We will support this. We will not discuss the details publicly. We will ensure that the Ukrainian army receives everything it needs, everything we can give, so that Ukraine can defend itself successfully. Friedrich Merz, Chancellor of Germany, during a press conference with the President of Ukraine.
Under former Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Germany refused to send Taurus missiles out of fears of escalating the conflict. But Merz has taken a firmer stance. In April, he even suggested that Taurus could be used to strike military infrastructure in occupied Crimea, including the symbolic and strategic Crimean bridge. For Germany, Taurus is not just important for Ukraine. It's also a way to demonstrate Germany's military resolve on the global stage. So why Taurus matters? The Taurus KEPD 350 is a precision-guided, air-launched cruise missile, similar to the UK-French Storm Shadow, but with some crucial differences. Its programmable warhead is designed to penetrate deep into hardened targets, like bunkers or bridges, before detonating, even coating structural layers to maximize destruction. With an estimated range of 700 to 800 kilometers, Taurus can strike deep inside Russian-controlled territory from behind Ukrainian lines. The missile could be integrated with Ukraine's newly deployed F-16 jets or with potential future deliveries of Swedish Gripen fighters. For now, the big question remains: will Germany back its bold rhetoric with action and provide Ukraine with this game-changing missile, one that could redefine the course of the war in Crimea? And continuing the topic of Ukraine-EU relations, here's a story of yet another attempt of Orban to prevent Ukraine's accession into the EU. Now he accuses Ukraine of unfriendly actions towards Hungary, an EU state, so he justifies the action to prevent EU integration of Ukraine with that.
Hungary will not approve the opening of negotiation clusters for Ukraine's accession to the European Union, said Hungary's Minister for EU Affairs, János Boka. He cited allegedly strained bilateral relations between Budapest and Kyiv as the reason. Moreover, Boka accused Ukraine of conducting information operations on Hungarian territory.
At the moment, Ukraine is conducting multiple information and intelligence activities in the territory of Hungary with the intention to influence democratic decision-making processes. In this political context, it's very difficult to engage in a constructive negotiation with Ukraine.
Hungary remains the only EU member state consistently blocking Ukraine's path toward European integration. In Brussels, Budapest's position is sharply criticized. The Danish Minister for EU Affairs emphasized that the European Union is interested in moving the negotiation process with Kyiv forward as quickly as possible.
We have to give Ukraine perspective of EU membership. We would like to, from the Danish government, to see the first cluster on negotiation open with Ukraine, and hopefully, actually we could open all the clusters. They are ready to negotiate. It is within the merit-based approach because they are delivering tremendously even during these war times. We think it is time to move forward with enlargement with Ukraine. I am sad to see that Hungary, as the only country, is currently blocking us for moving forward with Ukraine, and we will use all tools available. We would put pressure on Hungary, and we hope that it will be possible to find solutions.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has consistently found various pretexts to stall Ukraine's EU integration. At times, he warns about a mythical mafia that would supposedly flood the EU if Ukraine joins. At other times, he threatens Brussels with economic collapse. In May 2025, Orbán went even further, accusing Ukrainian intelligence services of trying to establish contacts with the Hungarian opposition to persuade Hungarians to support Ukraine's EU membership.
Mr. Orbán has chosen to blame Ukraine for everything in order to be re-elected next year and stay in power. If in the past, Ukraine was used as a bargaining chip by Budapest in negotiations with Brussels, today, paradoxically, Ukraine has become a means of political survival for Orbán and his Fidesz party. If this doesn't work, their chances of returning to power in the future are significantly reduced.
Under the pretext of combating so-called Ukrainian spies, the Fidesz party, led by Viktor Orbán, is pushing a controversial bill. It proposes restrictions on the work of independent media and human rights organizations receiving foreign funding. In Hungary and abroad, the initiative is already being compared to Russia's foreign agents law, a tool used by dictator Putin to silence dissent. The European Commission has labeled Budapest's actions yet another attack by Orbán on democratic values and promised a strong response.
We believe it is a breach of EU law, including a breach of internal market freedoms and also a breach of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And we have asked the Hungarian government to withdraw that draft law. And in the absence of that happening, and should they proceed to legislate and enact this legislation, we stand ready to use the tools at our disposal as a Commission.
The policies of the Fidesz party and its leader Viktor Orbán are increasingly diverging from the core principles of the European Union. The European Commission has already frozen 18 billion euros in EU funding to Hungary. Now, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has warned Budapest about a possible complete cutoff of financial aid. Within the EU Council, there are discussions about triggering a sanctions mechanism against Hungary, potentially even stripping it of its voting rights for its systematic disregard for fundamental EU values. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
While Ukraine innovates, adapts, and resists, many in the West still hesitate, negotiate, or simply watch. But war does not wait. What do you think will happen next? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for more with the gaze.
Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief. I'm back, and I've been given word that you guys have missed me, which I really appreciate, but there were lots of comments on my fellow colleagues' videos asking, what did you do to Yulia? Well, no one did anything to Yulia. Yulia took her first vacation in a year and a half, and I will tell you it was much needed. But I do really appreciate your worries, and I do really appreciate you reaching out and, of course, missing me. Anyways, I'm back, and I'm back for a while. I'm not planning any trips anytime soon, so you will be seeing me enough for you to get annoyed with me and get tired of me again. Today we're going to be talking about what is it that makes Trump so icky about Zelensky. And, of course, we're going to discuss it in the comments down below, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. So, of course, please leave your questions, suggestions, constructive criticism, anything you have on your mind, or well wishes for my comeback. And, yeah, I read all of it. I appreciate all of it. Let's go. So, if you might have seen, there was this quote from Donald Trump earlier, where he was basically saying that he's really disappointed and really upset about Putin sending all of these missiles and drones onto Ukraine, specifically onto Kyiv, and killing so many people needlessly. And at the end of that quote, he also remembered Zelensky. But let's break it down, starting with the fact that he was complaining about Putin. He said Putin was a really good guy, and, you know, they've always had an understanding, and Trump had this really good relationship with him, and he doesn't understand how he has gone mad because he's just doing all of these crazy things. So here's what bugs Trump. It's not the lives lost. It's not necessarily the fact that Putin is shooting at Ukraine, because he's done that before, and Trump didn't really care. It's the fact that Trump thought that Putin has enough respect for him to not do that while they're talking. Because if you watch Trump's interviews, he has said multiple times that we're in the middle of these conversations and he's still doing that. So he's actually flabbergasted, and it's kind of embarrassing and humiliating to him. It's like a slap in the face. Because in fact, Putin doesn't care about Trump. He doesn't care about these conversations. Trump hasn't shown him an upper hand. Trump keeps threatening sanctions every other day. If Russia doesn't stop doing what it's doing, Russia continuously doesn't only not stop doing what it's doing, but it increases the intensity of these attacks pretty much every day. And what does it get in return? It does not get missiles to Ukraine. It does not get support for Ukraine. It does not get any more weapons for Ukraine. It doesn't get harsher sanctions. It gets Trump's rants, truthfully, on Truth Social, and him screaming and throwing temper tantrums about how he's disappointed in Putin and how he doesn't understand what happened to him. I mean, no one in the world is really surprised about why Putin is doing what he's doing, and he didn't just recently go mad. It's just that Trump didn't expect Putin to literally, absolutely not give a single bleep about Trump and their conversations. He doesn't have enough respect for him, and that's what bugs Donald. And to further prove my point in that, here is what Russia has started doing recently. I mean, we all know that Ukraine has been under barrages of attacks for many, many days, and well, for 3.5 years to be exact. But they have gone worse and worse and worse. And recently, and not even recently, but since Trump has entered the negotiation, actually, they have gotten worse. And this most recent one was particularly probably one of the worst I have seen in my life in Kyiv in the past 1.5 years. So there was an attack Friday to Saturday night, which was horrendous. Kyiv was in flames. There were so many comparison pictures online between London in World War II and it being up in flames in all different locations and Kyiv that weekend. So what prompted Putin to send all of these missiles and drones onto Kyiv? I mean, really nothing, just the fact that he's a bloodthirsty monster, but also the fact that it's Kyiv's birthday. It was Kyiv's birthday last weekend. And of course, to celebrate that birthday, Putin had to set it on fire. So Friday to Saturday night, there were barrages of drones, there were barrages of ballistic missiles, and barrages of cruise missiles. I, fortunately, wasn't here for that because I was just returning from my trip. I did, however, get here Saturday to Sunday night at 2 in the morning. Right during the epicenter of the worst hell unleashed on Kyiv. So here's how it went. I was actually driving from Krakow to Kyiv, and I switched the car I was in to my car in Lviv, where my parents live, and at about 2 p.m., I got to a block post. A block post is basically a military checkpoint right at the entrance to Kyiv, where they check your documents and they make sure that everything tracks. And sometimes there are soldiers at the block post during broad daylight, but mostly at this point in the war, they're only there during the night. It was 2 a.m., it's 2 hours past curfew, I'm not supposed to be out. So most people actually can't get into Kyiv at that time, and they will be forced to find a place to stay till 5 a.m. until the curfew is lifted. You do have to have a reasonable reason as to why you're traveling at this hour, which I did. I crossed the border, and that is actually a valid reason because I'm just trying to get home. So after they checked my documents, checked my story, checked where I lived, and checked that I did actually have a border crossing stamp, they did let me go. At that point, that was about 2:30, and I entered my underground garage in my building and saw literally, I would say, almost every person in my building in the garage. So I instantly realized that there is a massive attack. Why did I not know about the air raid? Because, well, when it was sounding, I wasn't in Kyiv yet, and my phone was dead. So there's that. And I get to the garage, I see that the entire building is there, so I understand something is happening. I asked one of my neighbors and I was like, hey, are you guys by chance hiding from Shaheds or? And they said, we're hiding from everything. It's everything. So I got really worried. I ran upstairs to get my dogs because I live on the 15th floor. As you can imagine, that's kind of scary. And I have floor-to-ceiling windows. And during these night attacks, that is just a surround sound IMAX experience that no one wants. So I ran upstairs to get my dogs. As I opened the door to my apartment, I saw a Shahed drone literally flying towards me. And then, thankfully, it flew past my building, but it did land somewhere in the neighborhood, and that somewhere is the viral video that most of you have probably seen of the boys running into the parking lot and a Shahed drone exploding right behind them. So that is the Shahed that was flying over my apartment complex. So that was not fun. I grabbed my dogs. I honestly was physically exhausted, so I just physically could not pick them up and go down to the shelter, so we spent the night in the bathroom. And while that was going on, I kept hearing ballistic missiles being taken down. I kept hearing impact. I also kept hearing drones. It was honestly one of the scariest nights of my life. And I found out that that was the night where I think a record number at that point of missiles and drones was shot onto Kyiv. And then the next night, which was Sunday to Monday, at that point, I don't think anyone in Kyiv actually cared for the hell that was breaking loose outside of their windows and outside of their apartments, because we were so exhausted on 3 nights of no sleep that we actually didn't pay attention to air raids. And thankfully, those were mostly Shahed drones. But not just some Shahed drones, it was the record number of Shahed drones ever launched on Kyiv. And the air defense was going off, like, I don't even know. I don't think I had a 1-minute window where I did not hear gunfire. So those were our past 3 nights in Kyiv, and that's how Putin sees peace negotiations. And that's how he sees peace, which, as I've said before many, many times, he doesn't want peace, he wants surrender. To him, peace is surrender. If Ukraine surrendered and didn't fight, then, you know, none of this would have happened. And then brings me to the second part of Trump's Truth Social rant statement, which is him being so upset that Putin is not taking him seriously and not abiding by their agreements and, you know, doing all of that I just described to Kyiv while these talks are going on. He, of course, decided to mention Zelensky and how Zelensky running his mouth and talking too much is really not helping. And, you know, I thought to myself, every single time that it's obviously Putin's fault and Trump kind of like half calls him out, he has to bring Zelensky into it and blame him more. And I was like, why is that? And you know what? I realized why is that. Because Zelensky is the only leader in the world that actually talks back to him. Zelensky puts him in his place. And Zelensky does not suck up to him. Zelensky does not try to kiss his feet. Zelensky does not try to act like what Trump is saying or is doing is okay and normal just to sort of mend the relationship. Zelensky is the only person that really does push back publicly, and it humiliates Trump. And that's why he really doesn't like it. Think about the Oval Office spat. Zelensky wasn't taking it. At a point at which it was just too much disinformation and too much and just getting ridiculous, he talked back, while most of the other world leaders just sit there and kind of play diplomacy, right? Because they're just like, oh, well, whatever. I mean, like, this has been happening and it's going to continue happening, so we're just going to listen to it and smile, right? Like, smile and wave like Madagascar penguins. Zelensky doesn't do that. And every single time that he's asked a question about Trump or Vance or anyone from Trump's cabinet, he doesn't say things, he doesn't say vague things to sort of, to hide what they're doing is not okay, and that, you know, they're blatantly favoring Russia and they're actually fucking up the process of negotiations. He says it very diplomatically, but he does say the truth. And he's also known to be the person who does say the truth and the person who's grounded. Here's what Trump hates about Zelensky so much and why he can't let it go, is because Zelensky is what Trump wants to be, in a sense that, you know, these people that voted for Trump, they voted for this big leader who is in with the people, who, you know, who is in with the working class, who says what he thinks, who doesn't care about political jargon. And I mean, Trump is not that. He doesn't say real things like they are and doesn't care about political jargon. He's just blabbering and he just says stuff and makes it up, while Zelensky actually says things the way that they are. And Zelensky is a person who is not from politics, who was an entertainer, who had a very successful entertaining business, who came into politics and now is leading a country during war for 3 years now, while he was given 3 days. And Trump is this person who doesn't come from politics, who's an entertainer, who's like an everyday's man. Meanwhile, he's a Nepo baby millionaire. And actually, he does kind of come from politics, provided that he had to be in those circles and he had to rub shoulders with billionaires and millionaires his entire life and with politicians in order to be able to pull off the scams and schemes that he has been doing with real estate and whatever else it is that his failed businesses were. So in reality, everything that Trump is trying to describe himself to be to appeal to his electorate, Zelensky actually is. And it takes Trump so much effort to try and be that, because in reality, everything that he does and all of his decisions and all of his policies signal otherwise, while Zelensky actually is that. And that's why he just can't stop commenting on Zelensky. To sum up, we are 3.5 months, I want to say, into the negotiations with Russia, and Trump, the best deal maker, has only made it worse so far. Ukraine continues standing and will continue standing. Russia has intensified its attacks. Ukraine has finally started developing and unveiling its own long-range missiles, and as we've heard yesterday, there have been limitations lifted off of Ukraine on the longevity and distance of long-range strikes that Western weapons can be used for. And word on the street is that we are probably finally going to get Taurus missiles from Germany. So all in all, even though all hell is breaking loose and it's really hard, and obviously all of us are underslept, slow, and tired, we're gonna persevere. The same way as Kyiv has always persevered. You know, since it was Kyiv's birthday this weekend, I will say this. Kyiv has been ruined and rebuilt, and currently it is being ruined. But every single time it comes out of it stronger, because what doesn't kill you, you know the rest. And I think that we as Ukrainians really do relate to that, because that's just our national mentality. So we're gonna keep being here, and we're going to keep persevering. For Trump, however, if he doesn't help Ukraine, that really is going to stick with him, and it's already sticking with him, and his political appearance already is crumbling. So let's see what's next, but something tells me that one of his cornerstones that are going to bring him to his demise are his absolute incompetence in dealing with the situation in Ukraine. That's all I have for you for today, but wait a second, I do have a question for you. We are planning on renaming the news brief, because it's not so much news anymore, but it is a brief and it is geopolitical analysis, and it is kind of, it's an opinion section. It's a geopolitical analysis opinion section, and we have been thinking about names that we could rename it to. So if you have something that's catchy and short and sweet and good for the algorithm that pops into your head, please leave it in the comments below, because I would really love some help. And of course, you know what to do next. Like the video, send it to a friend, family member, anyone who would be interested. Leave a comment with question suggestions or answering my question. And of course, subscribe to this channel and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss when the next episode comes out.
Watch right now on the Front News Project. Putin was spotted in the Kursk region. Meanwhile, drones are striking all across Russia. Oil depots have been destroyed, factories are burning. The Russian army is preparing a new offensive. Kyiv, Sumy, and Poltava are under threat. Exclusive details. And also, the modernization of deadly Russian drones. Shaheds will become even more dangerous. Watch fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his gang unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom continues. Greetings, this is Front News. Vladimir Timoshenko is with you. For the next 30 minutes, you will hear the truth about the war, which our journalists gather from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then let's begin. And we start right away with exclusive material. Russia may launch another offensive in the near future. The enemy's goal is to reach Poltava through the Sumy region in order to further attack Kyiv. This is exactly what various public channels are reporting right now. In a minute, we'll tell you when this offensive might begin. In addition, yes, Russia failed to launch its nuclear Yars, but at the same time, the enemy's Shaheds have become even more dangerous. Now these drones are equipped with combined warheads of two types, Russian and Iranian made. Both weigh 90 kilograms, which is almost twice as much as the standard 50-kilogram version that was used previously. But that's not all. The Russian Federation is moving elite troops to the Kursk region instead of advancing in the east. This was reported by the Ukrainian General Staff. All the details are in our report.
Russia is once again blackmailing Ukraine with a large-scale offensive along the entire front line. There are opinions that Poltava and the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, could be under threat.
The resources of the Russian army are being depleted one way or another, regardless. And in any case, we are essentially saying that the offensive impulses Russia is showing today are quite clearly simply not enough to carry out full-fledged operational tactical level operations at this time. Obviously, the Russian strategic offensive operation, on the other hand, is still ongoing.
In addition to threats to use the RS-24 Yars missile with a possible nuclear warhead against Ukraine, Russian forces have begun employing a new tactic to exhaust Ukrainian troops. These are breakthroughs using motorcycles, buggies, and scooters. Considering that the Yars missile never actually launched from the test site, while the scooters at least managed to move, the latter idea is more advantageous for Russia.
This so-called summer campaign, or rather, yet another summer campaign by the enemy, is indeed entering its active phase, and it is clear that the priorities right now are attempts to fully occupy the Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
After analyzing the situation, the Institute for the Study of War concluded that Russia is not agreeing to a ceasefire before peace negotiations in order to advance on the battlefield and secure concessions from Ukraine and its partners.
We can see how complicated the situation has become right now for us in the Pokrovsk direction, because the enemy is managing to cut off logistics on the Kostiantynivka-Pokrovsk highway. In fact, it's clear that the battle for Kostiantynivka, which we've talked about, has really already begun.
No matter how Russia advances, the Ukrainian armed forces are confidently eliminating the occupiers from our land. 1,030 Russian invaders were eliminated in the past day alone. In total, since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has lost more than 975,000 soldiers killed and wounded in its war against Ukraine.
The enemy's attempts have been and continue to be assessed by our command in order to deploy our forces and resources in defense, so as not to allow a breakthrough or a collapse of the front. This is our main task for today, as well as, of course, the opportunity to exhaust the enemy's resources as much as possible.
The Ukrainian armed forces have achieved tactical successes even in the so-called liberated Kursk region, according to statements from the Russian side. Recently, Ukrainian soldiers advanced to the southern outskirts of the settlement of Tetkino in the Kursk region. However, the Russians also had certain successes there. Specifically, there were recorded advances by the occupiers toward the international border checkpoint southeast of Tetkino.
The main thing is that part of this border area remains under the control of the defense forces. The defense forces continue to carry out their assigned tasks. The Kursk operation is not over. In this regard, I would also add that I consider the Belgorod situation together with this.
The occupiers have reduced infantry assaults, but increased the number and scale of air and artillery strikes in the Kupiansk area. However, in the Borova area, Ukrainian forces have recently achieved successes. It has been confirmed that the defenders have advanced west of Sergeyevka.
But the Kupiansk direction is one of the priorities for the Russians in this offensive campaign, in this wave, this next offensive wave, the summer one. Accordingly, as I already mentioned, the enemy will continue trying to advance in the direction of Borova and Kupiansk.
According to reports from the General Staff, the aggressor is now forced to transfer reserves to the Kursk region from other directions, in particular airborne troops and naval infantry, which were supposed to reinforce offensive actions in the Toretsk, Pokrovsk, and Orekov directions. Despite the fact that the Russian army also continues combat operations in the directions of 4 key industrial cities in the Donetsk region. These are Kostiantynivka, Drushkivka, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk.
Also, on the night before last Sunday, the enemy attacked various regions of Ukraine using 273 Shahed drones and decoy drones. This attack affected the Kiev region, Dnipropetrovsk region, and of course Donbas. And in the city of Vasilkiv, not far from the capital, one of the Russian drones killed a young woman. Her young son, father-in-law, and mother-in-law are in the hospital. Their house was destroyed, as was the neighboring one. TSN correspondent Mariana Bukan visited the site of the tragic events.
Throughout the entire period of the war, this was the most terrifying. There have never been strikes of this scale before, probably never, and especially not in our city.
Apartment buildings without windows, a burning medical center, and private homes completely destroyed. This is the result of the most massive enemy attack on the city of Vasilkiv in the Kyiv region. On this street, 2 private houses were completely destroyed. It was a direct hit. It struck this house. A 27-year-old woman lived here. She died, and 3 more people from here are in the hospital. Her name was Anna. She was a photographer. In the middle of the house, only the corridor, kitchen, and bathroom survived. An unfinished cup of coffee, broth on the stove, and pancakes that were being defrosted for breakfast. It's clear that the family was preparing for a completely different Sunday morning. Lyubov, a distant relative of the deceased, says, "There were 5 people in the house at the moment of the strike. Anna with her husband and their 4-year-old son Mark, and the husband's parents. They are currently in the local hospital. And little Mark, the father who survived, took to Akhmatit. The boy has shrapnel wounds on his face.
He won't be able to see because a piece of shrapnel hit him."
The strike also severely damaged the neighboring house. Here, an entire wall was blown out and the roof is gone. Fortunately, no one was hurt here.
There's nowhere to live.
Nadezhda Pivin is the closest neighbor of the affected family, and also their godmother. She also no longer has a home.
I sit here and look around and my heart feels empty.
Her family was saved because they managed to reach the shelter in time.
The explosions were extremely powerful. We were thrown around a lot, but with that last one I realized something was wrong here. Because the sound was so sharp, almost cutting. I always hide, and I tell everyone, please people, take cover.
Almost all the neighbors who live nearby came to help clear out what was left standing for those affected.
Standing. Honestly, my heart is just breaking. All the neighbors came to help too.
And Nadezhda sits by her ruins and doesn't want to leave them.
All day I've been here empty. This is my home, I put down roots here. This is my walnut tree, this is my apricot tree, these were my onions, my garlic. I want to live here. I grew up here, I was born here, I'm used to this place.
Right behind Nadezhda's destroyed house is a church that's almost 300 years old. And it withstood even though it was left without windows.
All of this used to be covered with glass, with icons, everything.
Father Ivan says, the main thing is to clean everything up and put things in order as much as possible by Thursday. That's the day of the service.
We're all trying to get everything done today, so that at least there will be something for St. Nicholas's Day.
The grandmother and grandfather of little Mark, who is currently left without his mother, are in different hospital wards. The doctors are not letting Valentina in, saying that she is in too bad a condition, both physically and emotionally.
Extensive multiple shrapnel and gunshot wounds to the soft tissue structures of the face involving both facial bones as well as the overlying scalp region, including the overlying skin. A CT scan revealed that the woman has a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the left frontal area of her brain.
Nikolai has an open leg fracture. He says when the attack began, the family was already prepared to leave the city, but they didn't make it in time.
I will never forgive them for this, those neighbors.
Those neighbors.
And now an analysis of the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Pokrovsk front, the enemy carried out 43 offensive actions during the day. The activity of Russian occupiers was recorded in the areas of the settlements of Yablonovka, Zarya, Shevchenko-Pervoye, Novaya Poltavka, Mirolyubovka, Elizavetovka, Lisovka, Dakskaya, Kotlino, Novosergeyevka, Udashnoye, Troitskoye, Kotlyarovka, Andreevka, and in the directions of Popovyar and Novonikolaevka. Meanwhile, as you have already heard earlier, the Kremlin is boasting about new deadly features of its Shahed drones. Allegedly, Russian engineers have equipped the drones with protection against electronic warfare and increased their warhead. Is this even true? Or is it just another myth of Russian propaganda? How in turn can Ukraine respond? Believe me, there is something to respond with. Our journalists know all the details.
Faster, more powerful, and more resistant to electronic warfare. The Russians have claimed that they have improved the capabilities of their Shahed drones, and now it will be harder for Ukrainian air defense to deal with them. Among other things, we see that Russian engineers continue to enhance the characteristics of their long-range drones. And recently they have achieved certain successes. This includes a new engine, a new warhead, and a new navigation system.
During this time, the Shaheds have undergone, well, if we count very accurately, about 8 or 10 modifications or upgrades. This is related to improvements in the transmission system, improvements in the communication system, and the addition of inertial, well, not inertial, or rather, yes, inertial systems, because initially they flew purely on GPS, then inertial systems were added, and now it seems there are even Shaheds that can fly using visual, that is, by map guidance.
The Russians also claim that they have supposedly upgraded the microelectronics, although it's more likely a matter of some new Chinese microchips. These are supposedly going to help bypass the electronic warfare systems used by the Ukrainian armed forces. And the updated anti-spoofing algorithm has even been called the best in the world by Russia.
There is information that with the help of Starlink, they have 2 communication channels, one for transmitting information and another for control. And in fact, a Shahed-type drone has now essentially become like an FPV drone, which is operated by an operator. So they are developing very actively in this direction.
At the same time, the Ukrainian side often cannot even assess the new characteristics of the Shahed because they try to destroy these deadly drones before they even take off.
At one
point, we destroyed several locations where Shaheds were stored, and this happened on the mainland part of the so-called Russian Federation, using the forces and means of the naval forces. There was even a case when this happened together with the instructors who were supposed to train the Russian personnel there. But let's get back to the updates. It is also reported that the drone's warhead itself has been modified. Its weight has reportedly increased from 50 to 90 kilograms, which is why the updated Shahed, however, has lost half of its range and can now fly a maximum of 650 kilometers.
There's nothing new here. They just